Imagine stepping into a world where nothing is as it seems, where past secrets are on the brink of being exposed and trust is a rare commodity. Ethan Parker, a reclusive billionaire, decides to test the honesty of his new maid, Clara Johnson, by leaving the family's safe wide open. But what starts as a simple test quickly turns into something much bigger. Clara, a young woman with dreams but haunted by scars from a past tied to the Parker family, is drawn to the mysteries hidden deep within that mansion. As Ethan watches her every move, a silent game of revelations and secrets begins. What Clara discovers inside that safe could change everything, not just for her, Ethan too. In a story filled with tension, unexpected connections, and moral dilemmas, get ready for a journey where trust and forgiveness are tested at every turn. Because sometimes, the key to the future lies hidden in the truths we're too afraid to face, and nothing will ever be the same. As I stepped through the grand entrance of Parker Manor for the first time, I felt like a tiny speck in a vast universe of opulence. Marble floors gleamed under the elaborate chandeliers, reflecting a light so bright that it almost hurt my eyes. My heart raced as I took in the intricate moldings and the sweeping staircase that seemed to spiral into eternity. I could hardly believe I was here, in this fortress of wealth that felt so far removed from my own humble beginnings. "Clara, right?" A voice broke through my reverie. I turned to see a middle-aged man in a crisp uniform, his expression warm yet curious. "I'm Harold, the butler. Welcome to the Parkers' home. It can be a bit overwhelming at first, but you'll get used to it." "Thank you, Harold," I replied, forcing a smile despite the flutter of anxiety in my stomach. "It's beautiful here. Beautiful and lonely," he said with a knowing nod, his eyes glancing toward a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the grand hall. "That's Mr. Ethan Parker. Well, let's just say he keeps to himself." I followed his gaze, and my breath caught in my throat. Ethan Parker. The name echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. He was a billionaire, a man of mystery, and yet here he was, observing me from a distance, with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. He stood tall, his posture radiating confidence, but there was something in his eyes, an inscrutable depth that suggested a life riddled with burdens. "Just remember, Clara," Harold continued, "you're here to work, not to pry. The Parkers have their secrets, and it's best to let sleeping dogs lie." I nodded, but curiosity gnawed at me. What could possibly lie beneath the surface of such glamour? As I set off to complete my tasks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into a story much larger than myself. Later that day, while dusting the shelves in the study, I stumbled upon the safe, heavy door ajar. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Was it really okay to look inside? My fingers itched with curiosity as I peered into the dark confines. Inside, I found stacks of documents and photo albums, their covers worn with age. "Just a peek won't hurt," I whispered to myself, my eyes darting around the room to ensure I was alone. I reached in and pulled out a large photo album, dust motes dancing in the slant of light. As I flipped through the pages, I was greeted by images of Ethan's family. Smiling faces, extravagant parties, and an undeniable sense of privilege that seeped from every picture. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. I turned sharply to see Ethan standing there, his expression unreadable. My heart raced. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low and steady, yet laced with an edge that made me acutely aware of my position. I was just cleaning," I stammered, clutching the album tightly to my chest. "I didn't mean to intrude." Ethan's gaze softened for a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something vulnerable beneath his stoic exterior. "You can put it back. It's not a treasure to be uncovered." "I didn't mean to invade your privacy," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just didn't expect it to be open." He stepped closer, and I could see the shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Curiosity can be dangerous," implied, a hint of sadness in his tone. "Sometimes it's better not to know." I felt a pang of empathy for him, realizing that beneath his wealth and power lay a person tormented by something unknown. I wanted to ask him what haunted him. The words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded, slipping the album back into the safe. As I closed the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just scratched the surface of a complicated man. There was a darkness surrounding him, and for reasons I didn't yet understand, I felt drawn to it. As I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if I had stepped into a web of secrets that would change the course of my life forever. As I stepped into the grand Parker mansion, I felt like a tiny fish in an ocean of opulence. The high ceilings loomed above me, adorned with intricate moldings that whispered of wealth and history. Every piece of furniture seemed to be a statement, a reminder of the family's legacy and the fortunes they had amassed. I could barely breathe under the weight of it all, my heart racing as I clutched my small leather bag tightly. First day, a voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find an older gentleman, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, I'm Clara," I replied, trying to sound confident despite the nerves gnawing at my stomach. He said with a nod. "Just keep your head down, do your work, and you'll be fine here." I appreciated the advice, but as I stood in the entrance hall, couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. My background was humble. I had worked hard to get this job, but now I felt like a mere shadow in this world of glitz and glamour. Just then, I caught a glimpse of Ethan Parker from the corner of my eye. He stood a few feet away, observing me with a curious intensity. His presence was overwhelming, a mix of strength and solitude that seemed to draw me in even as it intimidated me. As I began my duties, I busied myself with dusting the ornate frames that lined the walls. My mind wandered to my mother, who had once worked for the Parkers, her stories of their lives swirling around in my head. I wondered if Ethan had any idea of the lives his family had affected. Later, as I was cleaning the study, something caught my eye. The coffer stood slightly ajar, a silent invitation. My pulse quickened as I approached it. Hesitation gripped me for a moment, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see Ethan looming nearby. But he was nowhere in sight. Curiosity overcame my caution. I leaned closer, peering into the darkness of the coffer. Inside, I found a collection of photographs, old and faded. They depicted a younger Ethan, laughing with friends, his eyes bright with a carefree joy that seemed to have faded with time. I picked one up, my fingers brushing against the surface, and suddenly I felt a presence behind me. "What are you doing?" Ethan's voice was low, yet it sent shivers down my spine. I turned, startled, my heart racing. I stammered, the weight of his gaze making it hard to think. I found it open. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, but there was no anger in his tone, just a hint of something else. Fear? Regret? "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As I stood there, I noticed the flicker of something in his eyes, a vulnerability that contradicted the aloof persona he usually projected. "These photos? They're not just memories," he said slowly, his voice a mixture of nostalgia and pain. "They remind me of everything I lost." Wanted to ask him what he meant, but I hesitated. Instead, I glanced back at the coffer, where a letter lay hidden beneath the photographs. My hand instinctively reached for it, and I pulled it out, revealing the yellowed paper. "What's that?" Ethan asked. His curiosity piqued, despite the tension in the air. "It looks like a letter," I replied, unfolding it carefully. The words were scrawled in elegant handwriting, but the content was explosive. An account of a scandal that had rocked the Parker family, implicating Ethan in ways I couldn't yet understand. I cleared my throat, the weight of the knowledge pressing down on me. "Talks about an incident involving your family," I stammered, unable to hide my shock. "Something that happened years ago." Ethan's expression shifted, shadows crossing his face. "I'd rather not discuss it," he said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his tone. "Why?" "It sounds significant," pressed, feeling a blend of anger and concern. "Because it hurts too much to relive," he replied, his vulnerability retreating behind a wall of stoicism. "You don't know what it's like to carry that kind of weight." I swallowed hard, torn between my desire to confront him and the empathy I felt for the man standing before me. "I may not know your pain, but I understand what it's like to be haunted by the past," I said softly, surprising myself with my own honesty. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Do you? Or do you just think you do?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I realized then that both of us were grappling with our own demons, our histories intertwined in ways we couldn't yet comprehend. And as I stood there, clutching the letter, I felt the fragile beginnings of a connection forming. one that could either unravel the very fabric of our lives or bind us together in a way neither of us expected. I stood in the vast expanse of the Parker mansion, feeling like a tiny speck lost in a world of opulence. The walls were adorned with grand portraits, the chandeliers sparkled like stars, and the air was thick with an unspoken history that weighed heavily on my shoulders. I could sense Ethan's presence, a looming shadow in the corner of the room, his green eyes watching me with an intensity that made my heart race. "Clara, right?" finally spoke, his voice deep and steady but with an edge of something unidentifiable. I turned to face him, forcing my nerves to settle. "Yes, Mr. Parker," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just trying to get accustomed to everything here." He nodded, a slight smirk playing on his lips. "It can be overwhelming. I remember my first days here. It's like stepping into another world." I wanted to ask him what that world looked like through his eyes. The words stuck in my throat. Instead, I forced a smile, attempting to mask my unease. As I resumed my tasks, I could feel the weight of his gaze lingering on me, analyzing, judging. It was as if he could see right through the facade I wore, the determined exterior that concealed the insecurities and fears swirling inside me. Later, while dusting the shelves of the study, I stumbled upon the coffer Ethan had left open. My heart raced with curiosity, and I approached it cautiously. Glancing around to ensure I was alone, I leaned closer, peering inside. Old photographs and documents lay scattered like forgotten memories. "What are you doing?" Ethan's voice startled me, making me jump back. I was just cleaning," I stammered, my mind racing to come up with a plausible excuse. "Cleaning, is it?" He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "It's a bit more than that, isn't it? You were drawn to it." I swallowed hard, feeling exposed. "I just found it open," I admitted, my throat dry. "I didn't mean to intrude." He studied me for a moment, then motioned for me to continue. "Go on then. What do you see?" I hesitated, but his eyes held a challenge. Slowly, I reached back into the coffer, pulling out a faded photograph of a younger Ethan, smiling beside a woman I presumed was his mother. "I see memories," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Memories can be deceiving," he replied, his tone suddenly somber. "They often hide the truth." As I sifted through the contents, I stumbled upon a letter tucked away at the bottom, its edges yellowed with age. I opened it, scanning the words quickly. My breath hitched as I realized it detailed an infamous scandal involving the Parker family. "What's that?" Ethan's voice was sharp, breaking my concentration. I hesitated, the weight of the letter heavy in my hands. It's just a letter," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let me see," he insisted, stepping closer, his expression shifting to one of urgency. "No, Clara." His voice dropped, taking on a more vulnerable note. "You found it. You have to understand, there are things about my family that are complicated." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. There was anger for the past, but also a strange empathy for the man standing before me. "I know about complicated," I said softly, my own history flooding back, my mother's struggles, the sacrifices she made. "But this is different." I took a step back, running a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. "You don't know the whole story." "Maybe I don't, but I can see the pain behind your eyes, Ethan. You're not just a billionaire. You're a man trapped by your own history." He looked at me, the pride flickering across his features. "And you think you know me? I don't know you, but I see you. You carry a burden, just like I do." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick with unspoken truths. I could see the walls he had built around himself beginning to crack, and it filled me with a strange sense of hope. In that instant, I realized that beneath his cold exterior, there was a man yearning for connection, just as I was. "Maybe we both need to let our walls down," he said finally, voice softer, almost vulnerable. "Maybe we do," I replied, small smile breaking through the tension. It was a small step, but in that moment, I felt a shift in our dynamic. We were no longer just a billionaire and his employee. We were two souls, navigating the shadows of our pasts together. As moonlight spilled across the meticulously manicured gardens of the Parker estate, I found myself walking alongside Ethan, air thick with unspoken words. The rich, sweet scent of blooming jasmine filled the night, wrapping around us like an invisible thread, binding our separate worlds together in this moment. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, heavy yet strangely comforting, as if we were both tiptoeing around something delicate, something that might shatter with the slightest misstep. "Do you come here often?" I asked, trying to break the spell of quiet that hovered over us. My voice felt small against the backdrop of the vast gardens. Ethan glanced sideways at me, a flicker of surprise in his dark eyes. "Not as much as I should," he replied, tone contemplative. "I often find myself lost in the echo of my own thoughts in this place. It's easier to hide in the shadows." "Sometimes the shadows feel safer," I admitted, looking ahead. "But it's in the light that we see things clearly, isn't it?" He paused, processing my words. "You've got a point there," he said slowly, as if he were unraveling layers of his own mind. "I've spent too long hiding. Maybe it's time to face the light." We continued walking, the soft crunch of gravel beneath our feet a gentle reminder that we were here together, yet still so far apart. I wanted to reach out to him, to bridge the gap between our lives, but the secret I carried felt like a stone lodged in my throat, heavy and unyielding. "Clara," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "I find it refreshing to talk to someone who doesn't seem afraid to challenge me." I turned to him, surprised. "Challenge you? I'm just trying to keep up with how different you are from what I imagine." "And what did you imagine?" he asked, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "The untouchable billionaire, always surrounded by luxury and power. You know, the kind of person everyone else admires from a distance," I said, my heart racing. "But now I see there's more to you than just that facade." He nodded, his expression shifting to something more serious. "It's a mask I wear. It's easier than dealing with the complexities of, well, everything. But you've seen through it, haven't you?" I hesitated, the weight of my own truth pressing against my chest. "Ethan, Clara," he interrupted, his voice low and earnest. "I want to know you. I want to understand the real you, not just the girl who cleans my house." His words sent a shiver down my spine. Did he truly mean that? Could he really see me beyond the surface? And yet, how could I reveal what I knew without risking everything we had begun to build? "Maybe we're not so different," I said softly, my gaze drifting to the moonlit path ahead. "We both carry our own burdens." "I'd like to think that," he replied, his voice almost a whisper. "But I feel like I've let my past define me for too long. I'm scared that if I confront it, I'll lose everything." "Sometimes, losing everything means finding something more valuable," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "But it's terrifying to take that first step." Ethan stopped walking, turning to face me fully. The intensity in his eyes made my breath hitch. "What if that first step is telling me what you've been holding back?" My heart raced as I considered his words. I could feel the truth clawing its way up, ready to spill out, but I hesitated. The thought of shattering the connection we had forged was unbearable. I started, but a wave of uncertainty washed over me. "I'm not sure if I can." "Clara," he said gently, "you don't have to carry this alone. Whatever it is, I want to share that weight with you." The sincerity in his voice resonated with something deep within me. I closed my eyes, taking a steadying breath. "It's about my mother," I said finally, my voice trembling, "and the scandal part it played in our lives." Ethan's expression shifted, brow furrowing with concern. "What do you mean?" I swallowed hard, the truth lingering on the edge of my lips, begging to be released. In that moment, I understood that the shadows could only hold me captive for so long. I needed to step into the light, no matter how painful it might be. But could I truly trust him with this? I felt a weight in my chest as I sat on the edge of my bed in the small room provided for me in the Parker mansion. The golden light of the setting sun filtered through the heavy curtains, casting shadows that danced across the floor. I had been trying to shake off the discovery of the old letter I found hidden in the coffer, but it clung to me like an unwanted shadow. The words of that letter echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the past that connected me to Ethan Parker in ways I had yet to fully comprehend. "What have you gotten yourself into, Clara?" I whispered to myself, staring at my reflection in the ornate mirror. My mother had always taught me to stand strong, but the thought of confronting Ethan about this scandal felt like a betrayal. He was not just my employer, he was a man I had started to care for. I had seen glimpses of the pain hidden behind his icy facade, and those glimpses had ignited a flicker of empathy within me. I took a deep breath and stood up. Decision weighing heavily on my mind. I had to confront him. I owed it to my mother and to myself. I could no longer be a passive observer in my own life. I made my way through the grand hallways of the mansion, each step echoing my resolve. As I approached the study, I could feel my heart racing. "Clara?" Ethan's voice called out as I knocked gently on the door. "Come in." I opened the door slowly, finding him seated at his desk, papers strewn about, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Is everything all right?" "Not really," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "I found something in the coffer." Ethan's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "What did you find?" I hesitated, the letter crumpling in my hand. "It's a letter about the scandal involving your family. It mentions my mother." Ethan's face paled slightly, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "Your mother? What does it say?" Taking a deep breath, I spoke quickly, the words tumbling out. "It talks about how your family's actions affected her life. She was hurt by the fallout of your family's decisions, Ethan." I didn't know until now. His eyes darkened with an emotion I couldn't quite place. I didn't know. I never realized the extent of the damage we caused. I only knew the scandal itself, not the lives it devastated. I felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. You never thought to look deeper? To understand how it rippled through the lives of those around you? "I was a child, Clara. I was protected from the consequences," replied, voice strained. "But I should have known better. I should have cared more." I took a step closer, feeling the heat of his shame radiate through the air between us. "You can't change the past, Ethan, but you can try to make things right now." "Make things right?" He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "How do you think I can do that? I have been running from my family's legacy for years. I thought if I could distance myself, the past would fade away." "Running won't fix anything," I insisted, my voice firm. "You have to confront it. You have to face the truth, not just for your own sake, but for everyone who was hurt, including my mother." Ethan looked at me, his gaze piercing. "You don't understand the weight of the guilt I carry, Clara. Suffocating." I took another step closer, feeling the tension crackling in the air. "Then let me help you carry it. Let's face this together. Your family's history might be dark, but it doesn't have to define who you are now." He stared at me, the vulnerability in his eyes striking me to the core. "Do you really believe that?" "I do," I replied, my voice steady. "You are not your family's mistakes. You have the power to change your path, and I want to help you." Ethan sighed deeply, the walls around him beginning to crumble. "I've never felt this way about anyone before, Clara. I've been so alone for so long, but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" I asked softly. "Scared of trusting again. Scared of opening up and being hurt," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I reached out, placing my hand over his. "We can't live in fear, Ethan. Let's face it together. I promise you're not alone anymore." In that moment, something shifted between us. Fragile understanding forming amidst the chaos of our pasts. We were two broken souls searching for redemption and hope in a world that had done its best to tear us apart. I stood in the vast, empty room, the weight of my mother's memory pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The opulence of the Parker mansion felt suffocating. Gold trim on the walls and the grand chandelier above me, shimmering with a cold indifference. Could almost hear my mother's voice, urging me to be brave. But the fear of what I had to do gnawed at my insides. "Clara." Ethan's voice broke through my thoughts, soft yet firm. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light behind him. "You look lost. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, caught off guard by the genuine concern in his eyes. "I'm just thinking about everything," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "About your family, your past. I found something in the safe that—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. Ethan stepped closer, his expression shifting from concern to curiosity. "What did you find?" I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "An old letter. It spoke about an incident, something that happened with your family, a scandal that ruined lives, including my mother's." The truth hung between us, thick and palpable. "I need to know how it all connects." His brow furrowed, and I could see the shadows of his past flickering in his eyes. I've lived with that shadow for too long. I knew there were consequences, but I never fully understood them, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. What did the letter say? It said that your family was involved in something that hurt a lot of people. It mentioned my mother specifically. She worked for you, Ethan. She was affected by whatever happened back then, I said, my voice trembling. Don't you see? I have to honor her memory. Can't let it go. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the tension in his shoulders palpable. I never knew Clara. I swear. I was a child, and I didn't understand the impact of our family's actions. I thought it was all just business. He paused, his eyes searching mine for understanding. But now that I know, You can't just brush it aside anymore. I interrupted, the heat of anger rising within me. There's a part of you that needs to confront this, to face the truth. I can't carry this burden alone. He looked at me, a mix of vulnerability and determination crossing his features, as if he were weighing the gravity of my words. You're right. I've hidden from my past for too long. I need to take responsibility for what I didn't know and for what I didn't do. I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. Then let's do this together. You and I can uncover the truth. We can find a way to make it right. Ethan's gaze softened, and I could see the walls he had built around himself beginning to crack. You really believe that we can change anything? That I can change anything? He stepped closer, his voice low and earnest. I do, I said, my heart racing. You have the power to make a difference. But first, you need to confront the people who let you down. People who hurt others without a second thought. I'll do it. Dad, his jaw set with newfound resolve. I'll confront the past and I'll take you with me. You deserve to know everything. The sincerity in his eyes sent a shiver down my spine. Thank you, I murmured, feeling a connection blossoming between us. But there's more at stake here than just our stories. It's about justice for everyone affected. Ethan nodded, determination etched into his features. Then, let's start this journey together. We'll face the darkness. We'll find a way to bring the truth to light, for your mother and for all those who suffered. As we stood there, a fragile alliance formed between us. A blend of hope, pain, and a shared desire to confront the injustices of the past. I felt a sense of purpose blooming in my chest. For the first time, I believed that together, we could make a difference. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the expansive gardens of the Parker mansion, I felt a surge of determination coursing through me. Ethan and I had spent countless hours discussing the shadows of his family's past, but that evening felt different. Felt like the calm before a storm. We had decided to dig deeper into the scandal that had haunted us both, and I was feeling the weight of what lay ahead. Are you ready for this? Ethan asked, his voice low and serious as we stood beneath the canopy of a sprawling oak tree. The leaves rustled softly in the evening breeze, the sound almost soothing against the tension in the air. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, a stark contrast to the confident facade he usually wore. I nodded, trying to mask my own apprehension. We have to know the truth, Ethan. There's too much at stake, not just for your family, but for mine too. The memories of my mother and the pain she endured flooded my mind, urging me forward. I had to confront this dark legacy, not just for myself, but for her. Right, he replied, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit I had come to recognize. I never thought I'd be doing this. Facing the past is harder than I imagined. His voice trembled slightly, and I could see the walls he had built around himself beginning to crack. It's not just your past, Ethan. It's ours now, I said firmly, placing a hand on his arm. We're in this together. We can't let fear dictate our actions any longer. He drew in a deep breath, and I watched as the determination settled into his features. Okay, let's find out everything we can. I think I know someone who might help us. With that, we made our way to the edge of the property, where Ethan had arranged to meet an old family friend, someone who had also been touched by the scandal. The air was thick with anticipation as we approached a small, dimly lit cafe just outside the estate. The scent of brewing coffee wafted through the door as we stepped inside, and I felt a flutter of nerves in my stomach. Ethan's demeanor shifted as he spotted the man seated in the far corner. There he is, he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Samuel Finch, he was always close to my father. followed his gaze to a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a weary expression. He looked up as we approached, surprise flickering across his face. "Ethan Parker, I didn't expect to see you here," Samuel exclaimed, rising to shake Ethan's hand. "It's been years. And you must be Clara," he added, turning his attention to me. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Finch," I replied, forcing a smile despite the weight of the moment. "Please, call me Samuel. I hear you're looking into the past," he said, his tone shifting to something more somber as he gestured for us to sit. Ethan wasted no time. "We need to talk about the scandal. We think there's more to it than what was reported. We need to know the truth about what happened." Samuel's expression hardened as he regarded us. "You're treading on dangerous ground. Past is best left buried, Ethan. You know that. Dangerous or not, it's time for the truth to come out. My family has suffered long enough," Ethan replied, voice steady but resolute. Samuel sighed deeply, running a hand over his face. "All right, but understand, the truth can be a double-edged sword. It could bring justice, but it could also destroy what's left of your family's reputation." I felt the tension rising in the air as Samuel leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "What you're looking for is not just about your family. It involves powerful people, people who would go to great lengths to keep those secrets hidden." "Tell us what you know," I urged, my heart pounding in my chest. Samuel hesitated, casting a wary glance around the cafe before leaning in even closer. "There was a cover-up, Ethan. Your father was involved, but he was also a pawn in a much larger game. Someone close to him manipulated the situation, and they've been protecting themselves ever since." Ethan's jaw clenched as he absorbed the weight of Samuel's words. Who was it? "I can't say for sure yet, but I have leads. People who were involved and may have information. You'll need to be careful. The deeper you dig, the more dangerous it becomes," Samuel warned, his voice a low rumble. As I glanced between the two men, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it. We were on the brink of uncovering something monumental, something that could change everything. But at what cost? "Whatever it takes, we need to find out the truth," I said firmly, "for our pasts and for our futures." Ethan nodded, a fire igniting in his eyes. "We won't back down." In that moment, we both understood. We were no longer just uncovering the past. We were stepping into a battle for our lives and the truth that had long been shrouded in darkness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Parker estate, I found myself sitting on a bench in the garden, lost in thought. The air was thick, with the sweet scent of blooming jasmine, the kind of fragrance that seemed to weave memories of childhood innocence and simpler times. Ethan approached, his silhouette framed by the golden light of dusk. I could tell he was deep in contemplation, just like me. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Not at all," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. I gestured to the space beside me, and he settled in, the weight of his presence palpable. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that felt heavy with unspoken words, each of us wrestling with our own demons. "Clara, can I ask you something?" He started, breaking the silence. I nodded, urging him to go on. "How do you deal with your past? I mean, when it comes back to haunt you?" His question struck a chord, resonating deep within me. "You don't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You learn to live with it. You carry it with you, like a shadow. Sometimes it feels like it's right beside you, and other times it's just lurking in the background, waiting for the right moment to remind you of what you've lost." Ethan leaned back, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I thought that once I achieved everything I wanted, past would stop haunting me. But it doesn't work that way, does it? He let out a bitter laugh, one that echoed with a mix of regret and resignation. "The shadows get darker." I turned to him, searching his face for signs of the man I had begun to understand, beyond the cold, distant billionaire facade. "You can't outrun it, Ethan, but maybe you can confront it. You're not defined by your mistakes. You have the power to change how they affect you." He shifted slightly, his eyes locking onto mine. "You sound so wise for someone so young. It's like you've lived a lifetime in your short years." "It's the scars that teach you," I replied, my heart racing. "You learn from the pain, from the things that hurt you. It's what makes you stronger." I hesitated, feeling the weight of my own scars. It's what makes you human. Ethan's expression softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his stoic mask. I've been so caught up in my own world, in my own guilt, that I've failed to see how my actions affected others. I've lived in this bubble, convinced that my wealth and power could shield me from consequences. That's what happens when you're isolated, I said, feeling an unexpected surge of empathy for him. You forget that your choices have real-world impact. You forget how to connect with people. He sighed, the sound heavy with the burden of realization. I want to change that. I want to confront my past and the people who've hurt me and others, but I don't know how. You start by facing it. Encourage, my voice steady. You have to be brave enough to confront those who wronged you, and not just for yourself, but for everyone who's been affected. It's time to take back your narrative. Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching for something in my expression. Will you help me? Will you be there with me when I confront my past? The request caught me off guard, but I felt a surge of determination. Of course, I will. We can face this together, but you have to promise me something in return. What's that? He asked, a hint of curiosity in his tone. You have to promise to be honest, not just with me, but with yourself, I said, my heart racing at the intensity of the moment. You need to let go of the guilt and start seeking the truth. You deserve that. He nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders, as if my words had given him a sense of purpose. Thank you, Clara. I know it won't be easy, but I feel like I can finally take that step. We sat there, the garden around us alive with the sounds of chirping crickets and rustling leaves, a world away from the chaos of our lives. I could feel the connection between us growing stronger, a bond forged through shared pain and a mutual desire for redemption. Let's do this, I said, my voice filled with resolve. Together we can face whatever comes next. As Ethan smiled at me, something shifted in the air, an unspoken understanding that we were no longer alone in our struggles. We had each other, and together we would confront the shadows of our past. As I sat in the dimly lit conference room, my heart raced with anticipation. The air felt thick, almost electric, charged with the weight of unspoken truths. Ethan sat across from me, his usual composed demeanor slightly frayed at the edges. We were poised on the brink of something monumental, and yet I could sense the storm brewing behind his calm facade. The journalist, a sharp-eyed man named David, shuffled through his notes, glancing up at us with an intensity that made my stomach churn. Are you both ready? He asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw clenched. As ready as we'll ever be, he replied, his voice low, almost a whisper. I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was bracing himself for the truth to spill out, the past to finally catch up with him. David leaned forward, his gaze piercing. I've done a thorough investigation into the scandal surrounding your family, Ethan. There's something crucial you need to know. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. The narrative that has been spun around you isn't the whole story. In fact, it's almost entirely fabricated. What do you mean? I interjected, my heart pounding in my chest. What are you saying? David took a deep breath, flipping through pages before landing on a specific document. The initial reports claimed you were at the center of a conspiracy with an influential member of society, but I've uncovered evidence that suggests a different culprit entirely. It points to someone much closer to you, someone you trusted. Ethan's expression shifted from tension to confusion. Who? He demanded, a hint of desperation in his tone. Your old friend, Mark Thompson, David revealed, looking directly at Ethan. He orchestrated the entire situation to shield himself from scrutiny, using you as a scapegoat. The room fell silent. I could feel the air leave Ethan's lungs as he processed this revelation. Mark? He echoed, disbelief etched across his face. No, that's not possible. He was like a brother to me. Sometimes the closest ones hide the darkest secrets, David replied, his voice steady but firm. The evidence is compelling. Mark has been manipulating the narrative from the start, and it's time for you to confront that truth. Ethan's eyes darkened, a storm brewing within him. I can't believe he would do that. He knew everything I was going through. He saw how the scandal destroyed my family. I reached across the table, placing my hand on Ethan's. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about justice, about making sure the truth comes out. We can't let Mark get away with this. Ethan turned to me, his gaze softening for a moment. I don't know if I can face him. I've trusted him for so long. What if I'm wrong? Trust your instincts, Ethan, I urged, my voice steady. You know him better than anyone. He did this. You have to confront him. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who suffered because of this lie. He nodded slowly, gravity of the situation sinking in. And if it's true, if he used me as a shield, then you have to make it right, I said, squeezing his hand. We'll do this together. David cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. The public needs to know the truth. We can't allow Mark to manipulate the story any longer. Once we expose him, we can start to rebuild. Ethan straightened up, his resolve hardening. You're right. I'll confront him. I'll make sure he understands the consequences of his actions. No more hiding, no more lies. As we prepared to leave the meeting, I felt a surge of hope. This was a pivotal moment, not just for Ethan, but for both of us. We were ready to take on the darkness that had loomed over his family for too long. Together, we would face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the sprawling grounds of the Parker estate, I felt an unfamiliar lightness in my chest. It was as if the weight of the past had finally begun to lift, and I was breathing for the first time in years. Ethan and I stood side by side, gazing at the garden we had walked through so many times, now a place of healing rather than sorrow. Can you believe it? Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost reverent. After all this time, we finally did it. We exposed the truth. I turned to him, seeing the flicker of relief in his eyes. It's surreal, isn't it? The world finally knows what really happened. I could still hear the echoes of the journalist's question, flash of cameras, and the release of tension as the truth spilled out. But it's just the beginning, Ethan. We have a lot of work ahead of us. He nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. Rebuilding the family name won't be easy. People have long memories, and the damage is deep. There was a vulnerability in his tone that tugged at my heart. But I want to do it right this time. No more lies, no more shadows. I stepped closer, my heart racing at the thought of the journey ahead. We'll do it together. You're not alone anymore. Ethan turned to face me fully, his expression shifting from concern to something deeper, more profound. Clara, I can't express how grateful I am for you. You've brought light into my life when all I felt was darkness. I swallowed hard, feeling the gravity of his words. You've changed too, Ethan. I've seen the way you've fought to confront your past. It's inspiring. His gaze softened, and for a moment I could see the boy he once was behind the walls he had built. You've made me feel things I thought I'd buried forever. Joy, hope, love. A word hung between us, heavy and electric. My heart raced as I processed what he had just said. Ethan, Before I could finish, he took a step closer, his eyes locked onto mine, searching for something. I know it's sudden, and maybe it's too soon, but I need you to know. Paused, his breath shaky. I love you, Clara. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. A rush of emotions washed over me, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Oh, Ethan, I whispered, feeling the truth of his confession resonate deep within me. I love you too. I never expected to find this kind of connection with anyone, especially not with you. His expression shifted from uncertainty to relief, as if the weight of his confession had lifted a burden he had carried for too long. Can we build something real together? Future that stands on truth and trust? Yes, I said, my voice steady and resolute. We will. Together. As we stood in the fading light, the chaos of the world outside our little bubble faded away. All that mattered was the promise of a shared future. I reached out, intertwining my fingers with his, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. We'll start fresh, I said, my voice filled with conviction. We'll rebuild not just the Parker name, but our lives, side by side. Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. I never thought I could feel this way again. Thank you for showing me that there's always hope, even in the darkest time. I'll always be here for you, I promised, my heart swelling with a mixture of excitement and determination. As darkness enveloped the estate, we stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by love and a shared commitment to truth. The journey would be long and arduous, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were both finally free, ready to embrace life and all its possibility. Whew, what a ride, right? But hey, this story is just getting started. Remember Dan? In the last episode, he got caught up in a mess no CEO would want to be in, and uncovered secrets that could bring TechWave crashing down. Can he turn things around before it's too late? Click on the video popping up on your screen now and dive into the next chapter of this wild journey. Trust me, you don't want to miss this.